Hey everybody, welcome. This is going to be setting up routed services. There are a few things that I'm going to have an assumption that you guys already understand how to set up Active Directory. And now, it may not be done on this one. I'm going to go ahead and set it up. Do I need two network cards in this one? No, not necessarily. But to be able to make it work as a lab and have an external clone device or an external operating system to set it up, yes, I do need that. So there's two things that you're going to need. You're going to need an operating system that's already installed. So there's going to be like that means Windows XP or Windows 7 needs to be installed so that we can experiment and see whether or not this routing service is going to work. So to do that, let's go ahead and set up a static IP addresses on our two network cards. The first thing I'm going to start out doing is I'm going to go to Start, go to the command prompt here, type in ipconfig. Now this is particularly the way my IP address is set up. The one that's in the classroom is going to be set up differently, but it looks like my IP address on this particular one is 192.168.1.12. So that's what I'm going to set my first network card up as. Under Network Connections, right click on my first network card here, turn off IPv6, and then go to Properties, and I'm going to turn the IP address schema 192.168.1.12, I believe is what it was, if I'm correct here. Yes, it was 12. And I'm going to tab down here for my subnet mask. Whoops. Tab down for my subnet mask. Put my default gateway in there, which is 192.168.1.1. Then put in my server's IP address here, 1.12, and then the final one would be 192.168.1.1. Now you notice that my IP address scheme is a little different in here, but that's going to get mine to work. So I'm going to go in here and close that and accept that. And I'm going to go back to the server manager here and make sure I turn off the ICS. So first I'm going to go to the Windows firewall here. Make sure that it's turned off. And let's go to Windows Properties. Yeah, it says the firewall is on, so I'm going to turn everything off. Profile, domain, off, public, off, apply it. And then I'm going to go down here to, actually go back up here, and then go to the Configure ICS and shut that down as well. And then OK that. And I'm going to close the server manager here just for a second. And plus the network cards as well. Okay, close that down. Get on the internet here. Make sure my IP address is still working. I'm going to do ask me later on this one. Alright, waiting for it to connect to the internet. Thought I hit enter. There it goes. Everything worked. And I'm going to go ahead and go to Tools, Internet Options, and I'm going to say Use Current State here, and then apply it, and then OK it. Let's close this down. Just go to the internet one more time just to make sure everything's working on my static IP. Yes, it is. Now I'm going to go ahead and set up the secondary network card. You notice when Server Manager opens up here, there it goes. And waiting for the screen to come up. It's configuring. You notice I have one static IP. I'm going to set my second static IP address up. So I'm going to go to my network connections again. Right click on the network card itself. Turn off the IPv6. Go to Properties. And let's just say I'm going to make this one 10.0.200. And the final one will be 10. Okay, that's going to be my internal network address. Yes, I know it's a non-routable IP address, but I want to demonstrate to you that it will work, so you can use different ones out there. Okay, so I'm going to leave that as is. Click OK on it. Let's go back to the server manager here, and you'll notice that I have a static IP address set up on both. Okay, so now I need to change the computer name and restart it before I even bother to add the Active Directory on it. So let's go to Change System Properties here. And I'm going to call this one Router 1. Click OK. OK again, and let it go ahead and restart. Alright, it looks like it rebooted OK. Let's go ahead and log into the machine here. Alright, looks like it's logging in OK. Right after this gets done loading, I'm going to go ahead and add the Active Directory roles here, and then a DHCP server as well. And you notice that I called my router router1, which is fine. And let's go to the roles tab here, and let's add roles. Click next, and let's highlight the Active Directory domain services. So that gets working just fine. Let's click next on that, next, and then go ahead and install. Alright, looks like that's done. Let's go ahead and close that. Let's go ahead and go to the Active Directory, and let's go ahead and configure that with the DHCP promo. Click next on it. We're just going through setting up Active Directory like we already have done. And I'm going to call this one CST Lab. Whoops. CST Lab dot PRV. Let's click next on it. Get through this here. Alright, looks like it's got up to this point. Let's go ahead and change this to 2008 server. Click next on it. It's asking me to install DNS, which is fine. Answer yes to that. Click next as well. Give it the password. Alright, looks like that's done. Let's go ahead and click finish and go ahead and restart. Now I'll be waiting for it to restart. Be right back. Hello. All right, looks like we're back. Looks like this is running. Let's fire it up here. Alright, let's go ahead and start adding the roles and wait for the server manager to pop up automatically, which it usually does. There it goes. Go to the roles manager here. Since now we have Active Directory running on it, seems like it's working for us. And let's go to add roles. Next, and let's add the DHCP server here. Click next. Next again. And so this is kind of weird. I know this is a little reverse from what we did in the lab. So this is my internet connection coming in now from where my home is. And here's what I'm using as my internal network, kind of like the way it is in the classroom. So just so you guys know, this is almost exactly matching the way it is set up in the classroom. So I'm going to click next on it. Remember, I do not want DHCP to run on the IP address that's coming from the internet, only the one that's internal. So I'm going to click next. I'm going to accept that as well. I don't need wins. I'm going to create a scope here just really quickly. My scope is going to be 10.0.200. Now it was 10 was my internal, so I can't do 10. I have to do one up above it. I'll just add 10 IP addresses. I'm going to do disable DHCP. Leave the credentials that I have set up on there. No changes otherwise than that. Let the DHCP install. And besides, we're going to have to go back and change that setup anyways and add the correct settings inside of it. Alright, looks like that's finished. Look, we have Active Directory, DHCP, and DNS server all set up. So let's go ahead and add the routed services. So let's go back to roles again, click next, and that's going to be under Network and Policy and Access Services. Let's click next on it. Next again, and let's check the routing services on here. And click next again, and install. It looks like that's almost done. Yeah, that was pretty quick. Now that we have it installed here, let's go ahead and activate that. You notice that it's red here, so it hasn't been activated from 2 network cards. Let's get that set up. Let's get it activated. So I'm going to right click on it to configure it. And to configure it, go ahead and click next. And I want to select network address translation. And click next. And what this is asking me to tell me which network card is bringing in the internet connection. So my particular one is going to be the 192.168.1.12. That's where the internet connection is coming in from. So I'm going to click next on that. And then finish. And I'm waiting to see if it's going to connect correctly, which it looks like it is going to. And I believe we can click finish. Oh no, it's just waiting to finish installing, which it did. This is now working correctly. Now lastly, I need to set up my DHCP server correctly. So the scope that I created earlier didn't have enough information in it, and we need to make that correction on it right now. So waiting for that to finish, because it's obviously still stalling something. This is why it's taking a little bit to come up. Be patient with it when you're running it on a machine that doesn't have very much memory in it. This is common for it to take a little while. So let's go to the DHCP. And I'm going to highlight the scope that I created before, and I'm going to go ahead and just delete it because I'm going to add one that does work. So now that I deleted that, I'm going to right click on the IPv4 and create a new scope. which kind of gives me a new wizard here, which is nice. Click next on that, and my starting IP, my starting IP address 10.0.200.11, 10.0.200.21. Click next on it, and I don't need to set up an exclusion range, so I'm going to click next. Click next again. Yes, I want to configure these special options. The router that I'm going to have for this one is going to be my internal network card, which is on that same port because it's going to route back to this. And I want to click next, and I do want to add my final IP address, the one that of my DNS that's internally to the router, which is 192.1.1. Let's add that. That ensures that it goes out there to the internet. It's going to process it. And yes, it did accept it. So let's go ahead and click next on it. Let's see if I can bump this one up to make it as the first one here, and see if that improves the DNS a little bit. So let's click next, and click next again, next, and then now we activated it. Alright, so now what I need to do is fire up my client workstation, and let's see if this one's running okay. If this one isn't, I can always fire up Windows XP. Nope. And I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to make sure that there is an OS on there. I'm going to right click on this, go to settings, and let's take off the network card as the booting device. Let's bump the hard drive up here to the top. Apply it. Let's see if it'll boot up now. Yep, looks like I do have an OS on this. Is this Windows 2000 server, or is it a workstation? Let's find out. It's either, I want that, I really actually want a workstation, I don't want server, so let's see what it is. Nope, I can tell this is server. I don't want to mess with that one. I'm going to delete this one so I don't have to mess with that again. And let's go ahead and fire up the Windows XP version that I have. We could probably get an IP address from that. You know what? Let me right click on this, go to settings on there as well. Go to system, I'm going to bump it up here to hard drive. Let's see if it'll fire up here. Yo. Looks like it's working okay. Oh, this looks like one that I've sysprepped. Yeah, well, I'll just go ahead and let it install. However, if it asks me for the license, I may have to install another OS, which I've got that feeling it's going to ask me for it. Yeah, and it is asking me for it. So, pause a minute here while I go load another operating system on here. So I'll be back here in just a few seconds. Alright, it looks like, hang on. Alright, looks like we're done here. Let's go ahead. This is my test operating system. You can see the server running in the background. It has 2 network cards. My scope is my address pool right here. My scope pool is IP address 10.0.200.11 to 10.0.200.21. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that one, and I'm going to go ahead and this is my guest operating system here running Windows 7. Type in CMD, do IP config, and it looks like I don't have an internal network address right there, or Microsoft one, which is 169. Let's go ahead and give it an IP address by typing in IP config switch renew. and wait for it to grab an IP address from the server. And it did. Look at that. It gave me the first IP address available. So it was 10.0.200.11. And it looks like that's working. Okay, that's good. Let's go ahead and exit out of this. And exit 2 here. And let's try to get on the internet. Yeah, it looks like I got on the internet, no problem. So you guys can see now the internet access works. This IP address is being delivered from my Windows Server application here, which has two network cards installed right here. So one is abridged and one is an internal network. And if I look at my Windows 2008, you can see that this one is an internal network only. As you guys can see that, internal network, meaning I'm getting my IP address from this internal server. So CMD and type in ipconfig/all. And then we can take a look at the routing table here. Everything looks like it's worked. It gives me an IP address from the other server. It's using this as the DHCP server gateway as my original IP. And then there's my DNS right there. So it's all working. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. Go shut down this other server, and we are done.